All right, welcome. Today, we're going to dive into something really fascinating from the ancient world. Chapter 15 of Deuteronomy. Believe it or not, it lays out this surprisingly radical set of laws that work kind of like a social and economic safety net. It's all designed to prevent poverty and uphold human dignity. So let's jump right in.
So just think about this for a second. What if debt had an expiration date? Imagine a world where every few years, all personal debts were just canceled automatically, not for one person, but for a whole nation. Sounds pretty crazy, right? Maybe like some modern economic theory? Well, it's the core idea we're going to explore today, and it comes straight from this ancient text.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll talk about this idea of a radical economic reset. Then, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the 7-year debt forgiveness and a concept called from servitude to freedom. After that, we'll touch on something called the principle of first things, and then we'll wrap it all up by connecting these ancient laws to some modern questions.
All right, let's dive into this first big idea. And we're not talking about some minor tweak to the economy here. This is a total rethink of how society should work, and it's all built around one single repeating cycle. And, the number at the absolute heart of this whole system? It's 7. Every 7 years, something truly profound was supposed to happen that would completely reshape the economic landscape for everybody.
So this whole thing was called the sabbatical year, or sometimes the year of release. It was basically a nationwide, legally required economic reset. Any loan you had out to a fellow member of your community was simply forgiven. Poof, gone, wiped clean.
Okay, so that's the big picture, but how did it actually work? What were the rules? Well, they were surprisingly specific, and they were all designed to create what the text saw as a much more just and fair economy. And right away, the law draws this really clear line in the sand. This release of debts was specifically for fellow Israelites. You are commanded to forgive them. But for a foreigner, a creditor could still ask for payment. So what you're seeing is a system that's really about protecting the community from within and making sure no one got trapped in debt to their neighbor. And the text doesn't beat around the bush about why it's doing this. This wasn't just about being nice. It was a tool with a very specific goal in mind. The goal, stated right there, is that there should be no poor people among you. I mean, wow, the entire system was designed to stop generational poverty in its tracks. This part is so interesting. The law doesn't just look at what you do, it actually looks at what you're thinking. It totally anticipates that human nature thing, right? Where you think, hey, why should I lend my neighbor some cash in year 6 when I know the debt's going to be canceled next year? The text calls that a wicked thought and commands people to lend generously anyway, promising that they'll be blessed for it. Now let's switch gears a bit, because this whole 7-year release thing, it didn't just apply to money, it also applied to people. Specifically people who had fallen on such hard times that they had to sell themselves into servitude. And the process is laid out so clearly. If a fellow Hebrew had to become your servant, it was only for a maximum of 6 years. Then, in that 7th year, they had to be set free. But, and this is the absolute kicker, you couldn't just send them away with nothing. The former master was commanded to give them a generous parting gift. We're talking livestock, grain, wine. It's like giving them seed money to go out and build their own life. So why? Why this radical generosity? Well, the text gives this really powerful reason, and it all comes down to empathy rooted in their shared history. It's basically saying, hey, don't forget you were once slaves in Egypt with nothing. You know what that feels like. And because God redeemed you, you now have a duty to be just as generous to others. But what if the servant didn't want to leave? Maybe they loved their master and their family. The law actually has an answer for that. It involved this really intense public ceremony where an awl was pushed through the servant's earlobe into the doorpost of the house. This was a symbol that by their own free will, they were choosing to become a permanent part of that household.
And just in case the master is thinking, man, this is going to cost me a fortune, the text has an economic argument for them too. It says that the 6 years of loyal service from this person was worth double what you'd pay a temporary hired hand. So that big parting gift, it's not a handout. It's framed as like a well-deserved bonus for 6 years of incredibly valuable work.
Okay, so we've got debt and we've got labor. Now let's look at one last piece of the puzzle that kind of underpins the whole philosophy here. It has to do with property and prosperity. So the rule was this: the very first male animal born to your flocks and herds, you had to set it apart. You couldn't work it, you couldn't shear it for profit. Instead, it was supposed to be part of a big communal meal. Think about what that symbolizes. It's this constant physical reminder that all your prosperity is really a gift. And if the first part of that gift is given back, it reinforces the idea that you should be generous with the rest. All right, let's tie this all together. We've talked about debt, labor, and firstborn animals. They might seem like random rules, but they're not. They actually paint a really clear picture of a specific worldview. So when you step back and look at the whole chapter, what do you see? A few core ideas just pop right out. You have these built-in economic cycles to stop poverty from becoming permanent. There's this fierce protection of individual dignity, making sure servitude never becomes lifelong slavery. You see the power of collective memory being used to create real empathy. And finally, generosity isn't just a suggestion, it's a command, a core virtue for a healthy society. And all of this leaves us with a pretty big question for today. I mean, these laws are thousands of years old, but the problems they're trying to solve, inescapable debt, cycles of poverty, economic exploitation, sound familiar? It really makes you stop and think. What would a year of release look like in our world today? And what can these ancient ideas teach us now?